In a strange town, a mysterious phenomenon happened. The dogs suddenly turned into people. Amid the confusion of the residents, there is a young girl named Saki, who accidentally becomes the center of this strange event. With a heavy burden in her heart, she carried a small bag over her shoulder and stood quietly outside her house. Her face reflected unease, but after a deep breath, Saki tries to calm herself by remembering that even though the world around her has changed, her beloved dog Ponta remains the same. Gathering all her courage, Saki opened the door and entered the house. The thrill made her heart pound as soon as she entered, and the sight that met her eyes made everything stop. Standing before her was Ponta, but no longer the pet dog she once loved. Now he is a young man, handsome and strange. She looked up at Ponta, now transformed into a young man, filled with confusion. It's hard to believe the scene before your eyes. Ponta, her childhood companion who grew up beside her like an older brother in her eyes, now stood before her like a young man. Although confused, Saki tried to regain composure, telling herself that she was still Ponta's master, still holding that role even though he had changed form. With a firm voice, she announced that she was home, her voice still steady even though her heart was churning. When Ponta saw her, his face lit up with joy. He cheered in happiness, then rushed towards her, arms outstretched, hugging her enthusiastically, even though he was now a human. Ponta's joy and excitement made Saki unable to react, and they both fell to the ground in joy. His mischief and playfulness, no matter what form he takes, remains unchanged. While Saki's mind was spinning, she reassured herself that, even though Ponta had now become a human, his nature had not changed. He still exudes the excitement and affection that she always loved. To prove it, Saki took the ball and threw it far away. Without hesitation, Ponta rushed towards the ball. Play with it with excitement like when you were a dog. Saki wiped her nose, knowing that everything was too much for her to bear. Saki walked through the crowded town, Ponta walking beside her. Her emotions right now were a mixture of confusion and shame. She felt like something was wrong. As to what people would think seeing her with someone who looked like an attractive companion, not just a pet dog. But then she told herself that Ponta was still Ponta, even though his appearance had changed, he was still the loyal, mischievous dog she always loved. This thought helped her relax, and enjoy the moment with him as they continued to walk. Suddenly, Ponta tugged on his belt, trying to take it off. Saki quickly realized what he was doing and felt panicked. She snapped, her voice high and sharp as a knife, reminding Ponta that this was a public place and that action was inappropriate, even though he still acted like a dog. Just then, they meet Ayane, a famous girl in the neighborhood with her noble Afghan hound Hibari. Ayane greeted Saki, making her suddenly wonder why Hibari now looked so beautiful, transformed into an irreproachable creature. Saki felt worried and sighed, realizing that this was Ponta's opponent. She remembered their previous encounter, believing that this time it would be a bloody war. Suddenly, Ponta rushed forward, wrapped his arms around Saki, and continuously barked loudly. Saki, surprised, suddenly understood that Ponta's actions were due to protective instincts. She tried to calm down, thinking that he was just trying to protect her in his own way. Hibari angrily asked Ponta what was wrong, while Ayane blushed slightly in annoyance. Ponta, slightly annoyed, replied that Hibari should go away. Saki, still in Ponta's arms, also blushed, feeling embarrassed but also filled with affection. In her heart, she thinks that she is still Ponta's number one. Ponta looked at Hibari and said that he hated him just because of the smell of his shampoo. Clearly, Ponta was still very scared and clung to her, his canine instincts blending with his new human form. That night, when the two lay in bed, Saki felt uncomfortable because Ponta was lying too close, taking up more space than usual. She sighed, realizing that whether they were dogs or humans, animals still had a habit of sleeping in inconvenient places. When she couldn't move, Saki's thoughts went back to the days when Ponta was still a dog, the happy moments they had together. But now, as she looked at Ponta sitting on the sofa in human form, she felt a slight sadness. She realized that even though the dogs had become humans, their appearance still depended on their owners. Saki's phone suddenly vibrated. A text message came in, interrupting her thoughts. She glanced at the screen and saw a reminder about Ponta's vaccination schedule. She thought to herself, "Is it that time again?" She knew that even though Ponta had become a human, he still needed regular health checkups and vaccinations like when he was a dog. Deciding to take Ponta for a walk, Saki held one end of the chain, the other end wrapped around his neck. Ponta happily followed, his eyes filled with excitement. However, as the two continued walking, Saki noticed that Ponta's expression began to change. He slowed down, seemingly becoming more hesitant. Saki sensed the change in his behavior and realized that Ponta had realized they weren't walking as usual. Finally, Ponta stopped completely, refusing to take another step. Saki entices him with a bite of food, and Ponta reluctantly follows her to the vaccination clinic. His mouth began to water, eagerly waiting for something. However, upon arriving, Ponta's joy quickly turned to fear. He sat down on the ground, his body shaking non-stop. Saki tried to calm him down with gentle gestures and gentle caresses, but Ponta was too panicked to react. He looked up at her, his eyes filled with tears, his gaze pleading for comfort. Saki's heart melted when she saw her dog so worried. She quietly apologized to her racing heart. She wished she could make things easier for Ponta, but she knew it was necessary for his health. The doctor called Ponta in, and he sat down, never taking his eyes off the doctor. Saki breathed a sigh of relief when she heard the doctor inform her that Ponta was still healthy. But she couldn't help but wonder if it was becoming more difficult to treat dogs now that they had human-like intelligence and emotions. However, the doctor seemed to disagree with that thought. With a gentle gesture, the doctor injected Ponta. His face was distorted with fear as the needle pierced his skin, making Saki unable to stop crying. She thought to herself that this was all for Ponta's good. Ponta looked at her, his eyes reproachful. He felt betrayed. He curled up against her back, shaking with fear and anger, as if to say that he hated her for making him go through this pain. Saki's heart was broken. She felt pain because of what happened today. Meanwhile, at the office, Ayane stubbornly refuses the presentation materials given to her by one of her employees. Ayane's hard face showed clear disappointment as she questioned the staff member, wondering if he had actually checked the documents before giving them to her. Her voice filled with frustration echoed in the quiet room. The employee, shocked and flustered, repeatedly apologized, but her cold, unforgiving attitude remained unchanged. She points out that the quality of this work is unacceptable. Ayane took a deep breath, then declared that she wanted to see the corrected version on her desk tomorrow morning, leaving no room for any arguments. After giving instructions, she picked up her bag and walked towards the office door. Behind her, the staff whispered, calling her the Iron Lady. Ayane knows that some people find her difficult to work with, but she remains cool, because her high standards are non-negotiable, and she makes no apologies for it. At the same time, on the other side of town, another scene was taking place. Ponta hugged an electric pole tightly, her body stiff with panic, while Saki, in a confused state, begged him to come with her. Her chaotic emotions were a complete contrast to Ayane, who entered the house with a determined expression. She opened the door and with sparkling eyes, announced her return. The pet dog Hibari responded to her in a cold voice, blaming her for being late and immediately asking about his meal. Ayane hurriedly prepared a meal for it, but Hibari, clearly dissatisfied, grabbed and pulled her hair, clearly showing his dislike of the food she had prepared. Ayane felt a wave of irritation rising up. She apologized in a weak voice, explaining that the food she usually bought was out of stock. Hibari, without any sympathy, asked why she didn't know about this before. Its voice remained cold and indifferent, causing Ayane to barely control her tears. She replied, her voice almost a whisper, acknowledging the situation, but inside she felt a surge of disappointment. Hibari, without any sympathy, ended his criticism and ordered Ayane to be sure to buy the exact food she liked next time. The next day, Ayane sat back, feeling deeply frustrated as she contemplated Hibari's cold and selfish attitude. Even though she was upset, she still realized that it was her responsibility, and she had to meet its needs. Hibari, unchanged in his demands, asked Ayane to cut his nails. She sighed, accepting that request with reluctance. Carefully, she cut each nail one by one, while thinking about Hibari's dependence on her. Even though he was a dog, he couldn't do these simple tasks by himself. She gently blew into his ear to calm his anxiety. After cutting her nails, a strange feeling of satisfaction began to creep into her heart. Even though Hibari's attitude was sometimes demanding and ungrateful, she still felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She didn't understand why she felt happy serving such a beautiful yet irritable creature. Taking care of Hibari, although challenging at times, brought her a special joy that she can hardly explain. Hibari thanked her in a cold tone, as if this was nothing special, then commented that this was really painful for her. At that moment, her phone rang, interrupting the quiet moment. A call from the company, and the voice on the other end told her bad news. There was a problem with the order, and if this situation persisted, the company would face a disaster. The weight of the call was like a heavy blow to her mind. When the call ended, Ayane groggily sat down on the sofa, her mind reeling with anxiety. She couldn't believe that she had made such a serious mistake, and imagined everyone's reaction. Her heart was heavy with worry and regret. Hibari, observing her tension from the floor, approached with concern. He lay down on her lap, placed his face in her hand and looked up at her with some tenderness. This simple but warm gesture helped calm Ayan's troubled thoughts. Feeling a little more relaxed, she looked at him and in a soft voice asked if she could pet him. Hibari raised his head slightly, responding with an unenthusiastic request. Give me a snack. Ayane, feeling a wave of affection for her demanding animal, promised that she would buy it for her. Him anything he wants. Saki is enjoying a fun game of frisbee in the park with Ponta. She threw the disc high into the air, and Ponta rushed towards it, with boundless energy. Every time he caught the disc, Ponta jumped up with a victorious look on his face. Saki felt filled with joy. However, as the game went on, she began to feel tired from the endless play, but still wanted to prolong the fun a little longer. While the two were playing enthusiastically, Saki and Ponta shouted happily. Ponta accidentally bumped into Uruha, Noriaki's dog, who was sitting nearby with his owner. Saki felt a bit guilty and quickly apologized for the disturbance. Noriaki, with a gentle smile, told her it was okay, soothing Saki's worries. Saki then noticed Uruha, Noriaki's dog, who was now sitting calmly nearby. Looking at Uruha, a feeling of admiration rose in her heart. With her soft fur and relaxed appearance, Uruha seems completely at ease even when she becomes human. His bright smile, his characteristic expression full of joy, shined. She couldn't help but notice that Uruha's relaxed posture and happy expression gave him an aura of contentment and charm. The contrast between Uruha's quietness and the dynamic game she had just participated in with Ponta surprised Saki. She was surprised at how Uruha, despite being so relaxed, still maintained her characteristic cute smile. It seemed that his breed's cheerful spirit was still intact, even in a peaceful moment. Meanwhile, Ponta was still engrossed in the game, staring at Uruha, who was observing them with mischievous eyes. Saki senses the tension rising between them. Uruha, sensing Ponta's displeasure, decided to stir up the atmosphere with a mischievous smile. He ran over, jumped on Ponta, gently pushed and encouraged Ponta to play with him. Ponta glared, his eyes filled with frustration and despair. When looking at Saki, Ponta choked up, tears sparkling in his eyes, silently asking for her help. Saki could only watch as Uruha, still full of energy and mischief, turned his attention towards her and squealed happily. He jumped on Saki. His naughty actions made her stumble. Ponta's frustration reached its peak. He frowned and in a sharp voice asked Uruha to stay away from him. Uruha, undeterred, continued to bother Ponta and Saki, not stopping. Noriaki pulled the dog's leash, telling him to leave, causing Saki to fall to the ground with a thump. The three waved goodbye and left, leaving Saki lying on the ground, her mind filled with whirling thoughts. She told herself, I have no regrets in this life. Just as she started to sit up, Ponta, still holding the plate in her mouth, approached with a determined look on her face. He pushed the disc towards her, wanting to continue playing. The next day, Saki hunched over her desk, surrounded by messy math books and notes. She prepared herself for a test that she was very afraid of. She struggled to understand all the knowledge, her mind felt like it was about to explode. Saki tried to focus on the material, but as she was trying to understand all the lessons, the razor fell off the edge of the table, crashing to the ground. Before she could get up to pick it up, Ponta, standing nearby, quickly bent down to pick up the knife with a precise and seemingly purposeful movement. Saki's eyes met Ponta's, and immediately, she realized from his mischievous smile that he was planning something. Ponta stood before her, razor raised, but still out of reach. His mischievous smile made it clear he knew he was causing trouble. Saki came up with a plan. She rummaged through her snack stash and pulled out a piece of bacon. With a wink, Saki handed the snack to Ponta in exchange for the razor. Ponta happily accepted it and exchanged the razor with a piece of bacon, then sat down to eat deliciously. Saki took back the razor, breathed a sigh of relief but couldn't help but feel frustrated. Once Ponta was satisfied with her snack, she returned to class, but before she could feel any sense of accomplishment, Ponta approached her again. This time, he was carrying the TV remote in his mouth, his eyes sparkling mischievously. He gently nudged Saki, drawing her attention away from the notebook. Saki, already feeling the brunt of the distraction, glanced at Ponta with a mixture of annoyance and amusement. Even though she tried her best to concentrate, but Ponta kept teasing her, holding the controller at different angles and waving it around. He gently grabbed her hand, shaking the controller as if challenging her. Saki's patience began to gradually run out. Determined to regain her focus, she opened a drawer and pulled out a rope bone, hoping it would be a toy enough to attract Ponta's attention. She sighed, giving the bone to Ponta as an exchange to get the remote back. Ponta's eyes lit up with excitement as he happily received the bone. As time passed, Saki occasionally glanced at Ponta, who was now sleeping soundly on the floor. His quiet and relaxed attitude made Ponta seem to melt into the quiet space of the room, almost invisible in the stillness of the atmosphere. Saki looked at Ponta's relaxed figure, wondering what things would be like if he was always this quiet. It felt as if he was no longer present in the room. Worried that Ponta would catch a cold from lying on the cold floor for so long, she decided to get a blanket. Carefully, she draped it over Ponta, making sure he was warm and comfortable. As soon as Saki finished, Ponta suddenly jumped up, full of energy. He jumped up and playfully plopped himself down on her, clearly wanting to turn this moment into a game. Even though Saki tried to tell Ponta to stop, reminding him that she couldn't play right now, he still refused to stop. As a result, Saki fails her test. Although pet dogs have become beloved members of the human family, their loyalty to their owners remains unchanged. Saki, a student who is taking additional classes because of difficulty with a math test, frequently finds ways to think about things during the day. One afternoon, as she was walking home from school, Saki wondered why her extra classes were taking so long, feeling a pang of guilt and frustration when she realized she wouldn't have time to walk her dog. Ponta was at home today, happily playing with the ball, completely unworried about what Saki was thinking about. While she was on her way home, she suddenly saw a little girl named Lily-chan singing happily, holding a leash leading her pet dog Takaru. This sight brought a smile to Saki's face, and she remembered that Lily and Takaru lived in a villa on the outskirts of the city. With his lustrous brown fur and dignified appearance, Takaru has the look of a true gentleman, an impressive and captivating presence. Intrigued by their relationship, Saki decides to secretly spy on them, noting how Takaru's appearance perfectly matches Lily's playful and innocent features. As she quietly followed behind, Saki wondered if it was really safe for a small child like Lily to go out alone, even with a dog that looked like Takaru by her side. Their relationship is clear through their synchronized movements and the joy that radiates from both of them. Takaru suddenly stopped, and Lily pulled on his leash, trying to get him going. However, Takaru still stood still, his eyes focused intently on the traffic light ahead, calmly and patiently waiting until the signal turned green. Lily understood what he meant, smiled happily, and followed him as they safely crossed the street. This sight makes Saki admire Takaru's intelligence and protective nature. It feels like Takaru is not just a lapdog, but a protector, always watching over Lily with great care and responsibility. As they continue their walk, they encounter a stray cat that scares Lily, making her grip Takaru's chain tightly. Without hesitation, Takaru stepped forward in a protective stance, scaring the cat away. Lily, initially panicked, looked at Takaru with eyes mixed with relief and gratitude. However, the excitement after the meeting made her tired and she began to cry, saying she was too tired from the trip. In response, Takaru gently lifted Lily onto his lap, carrying her the rest of the way home. This act of care made Lily smile, turning her tears into joy. As she hugs Takaru, Saki reflects on the difference between the discipline of dogs like Takaru and Ponta. When they arrived at the mansion, Takaru sat quietly, letting Lily lovingly take care of him, calling him good dog, rewarding him with treats, and playfully tugging at his cheeks. Their relationship is filled with love and joy. Tired after a long day, Lily hugged Takaru tightly and fell asleep next to him, feeling comfort and peace in his presence. Every dog has special features that make them special. Hibari believes that dogs transcend their physical form, connecting deeply with humans. Uruha sees herself as a healer, providing comfort and comfort. Takaru values honesty, integrity and responsibility. Ponta, Saki's dog, is full of energy and enthusiasm, bringing joy and vitality. A girl, fascinated by Uruha Samoyed's cuteness, couldn't help but tell Noriaki-kun that he was really cute. She suggested that they keep Uruha, her heart drawn to his adorable appearance. Noriaki agreed and soon, Uruha came over and sat on the girl's lap. However, the atmosphere changed suddenly when the girl's discomfort became apparent. She felt frustrated because Noriaki-kun had to work on his day off, even though he promised to spend the day together. She felt hurt and unappreciated, expressing frustration that his work always seemed more important than their plans. Although he sincerely apologized, the girl's disappointment was still there, creating an oppressive atmosphere full of tension. In frustration, the girl turned her attention to Noriaki. She commented on how he seemed to have difficulty expressing his emotions, and she found it difficult to understand him if he couldn't speak. Her gaze softened as she looked at Uruha, but sadness was still evident on her face as she prepared to leave. She shares her situation with Noriaki-kun, revealing that her new place does not allow pets. With a combination of sadness and resignation, she introduced Uruha to his new master, Noriaki. She gently placed Samoyed in his arms, her heart heavy with the goodbye. With a pat on Uruha's head, she said goodbye and walked away, leaving Uruha with him. Currently, Noriaki is lying comfortably on the bed, enjoying the moment of rest. Uruha, always enthusiastic and full of energy, approached him with a happily wagging tail and a hopeful look in her eyes. While excited, Uruha accidentally dropped a few drops of saliva on Noriaki's face. Surprised by the sudden action, Noriaki looked at Uruha and asked, "What are you doing?" Uruha responded with a cheerful wag of his tail and urgent eyes, clearly wanting to go for a walk. Noriaki agreed to take him out. Uruha, her tail wagging excitedly, seemed to understand and followed him excitedly. As they prepared to step out, the fresh air made Uruha's joy even more evident. The sadness from before had completely disappeared, replaced by the excitement of the new adventure. When Uruha and Noriaki walking, they met two girls chatting and praising Uruha's cuteness. Thinking it was playtime, he jumped towards them, avoiding Noriaki's attempts to stop them. Soon, Uruha was nestled between the two girls and enjoying their gentle caresses and happy head pats. A moment later, Noriaki gently reprimanded Uruha for jumping on strangers, but Uruha happily replied that if those people were happy, then he was happy too. At that moment, Noriaki suddenly remembered his old master, who once said that if he couldn't talk, then he would never truly understand that person. Noriaki looked at Uruha's carefree, realizing that there was still a lot he could learn from this furry friend. Standing there and thinking about Uruha's habit of jumping on other people, Noriaki admitted that he still had some work to do. It was at this time that he discovered a flyer about a dog training class, which filled him with hope. A few days later, Noriaki and Uruha attended a class at the Nakayoshi Pet Center, where they met pet owners and their dogs. The coach greeted them warmly and introduced himself, assigning Noriaki and Uruha as a pair. She also reassured Noriaki that Uruha would be under his care. Even so, Noriaki's worry was still evident on his face, with small drops of sweat forming on his forehead. Meanwhile, Pana was lying on the sofa, looking serious. Saki tried to take pictures of him, thinking he sat like that every time he was bored. But just as she was thinking about that, her phone was full of photos with Panta's stern expression. Panta sensed Saki's presence and rushed towards her, with an irresistible charm, inviting her to play with him. At the same time, Noriaki and Ayane also went to the dog training class, taking Uruha and Hibari with them. Noriaki politely greeted Ayane, saying it was nice to meet her and looking forward to receiving her care. She responded with a smile, encouraging him to try to work together with his dog. While they talked, Uruha excitedly jumped towards Hibari, wanting to play with her, but Hibari firmly refused, telling Uruha not to touch her. Although Noriaki tried to calm the situation, Uruha continued to tease Hibari. In the end, Hibari caught Uruha and apologized to Ayane, who reassured him that it was nothing serious. Turning to Nakayoshi, Noriaki admitted that Uruha had difficulty respecting personal boundaries. Nakayoshi nodded in agreement, affirming that it was definitely a problem. Noriaki then asked Ayane about her training goals for Hibari. Ayane became thoughtful, explaining that she wanted to improve Hibari's obedience because she was worried that her weakness might make him unhappy. She also said she hopes to help Hibari become more courageous, likening it to training from a servant's perspective, which she believes is very similar to training for humans. Noriaki contemplates Ayane's goal, wondering if it is a good thing or not. At this time, Nakayoshi spoke up and explained that dogs inherently live in herds and communicate with each other for a long time, so owners need to establish rules between themselves and their pets to bring peace of mind. Both Noriaki and Ayane listened carefully. Nakayoshi announced that since today was a test event, they would practice the leadership walk exercise. They both pondered this concept, and Nakayoshi-san explained that when walking the dog, they needed to walk side by side. If the dog goes first, it may indicate that the master-slave relationship is not yet firmly established. After the explanation, they started practicing. When Noriaki went for a walk, Uruha, the energetic dog, ran forward, jumping excitedly. Meanwhile, Noriaki had difficulty trying to restrain him from behind, clutching one side of the chain. Hibari pulled harder again, leading Ayane by the chain. She thought to herself, humorously thinking that this path seemed to be created for her, to go behind his back. She shook her head, feeling tired of the current situation. Both Noriaki and Ayane were unsuccessful in the leadership walk exercise. The coach asked Noriaki to give her Uruha's leash so she could model it. She gently ordered Uruha, telling him to follow, and Uruha, with some confusion, seemed to be wondering if this was a challenge. However, after just a few seconds, he automatically followed Nakayoshi, walking steadily and perfectly. Nakayoshi suggested Ayane try something simple, like giving Hibari a snack. Noriaki advised Ayane to be more assertive in her teaching style, like when speaking to a new employee at the company. Ayane began to imagine, her mind flying, and pictured a scene. I was in a formal office. Hibari, wearing business clothes and long hair, was giving her documents to stamp. Nakayoshi reminded them that practice will make them better, and encouraged them both to start practicing the lesson immediately. Both Noriaki and Ayane nodded in agreement and started walking with their dogs. As Ayane walked beside Hibari, she shyly covered her face with her hands. Suddenly, Hibari rushes towards Uruha, and Ayane rushes to intervene, apologizing to Noriaki while trying to separate Hibari from Uruha. Noriaki observed the chaos, thinking that Hibari was holding Uruha in a tight grip, like a camel clutch. Looking at the turmoil between the two dogs, Noriaki told himself that this situation was the result of pampering them too much. Ayane also agreed with that thought. She felt grateful to be able to attend class with Noriaki and hoped he would continue to participate in the following classes, hoping he would be her companion in the next lessons. Meanwhile, Saki hears about a new cafe in her neighborhood that is said to be dog-friendly, so she decides to try it out with Ponta. As they sat down, Ponta began to cry out strangely, and Saki took a sip of water, feeling like something was wrong. She looked around and noticed that the atmosphere in the bar was like a gala party, with both people and dogs wearing the same outfits. The scene was so strange that Saki couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. Saki realized that this cafe was completely different from what she expected and decided to keep a nervous attitude. Ponta seemed to notice someone, making Saki curiously follow his gaze. As she approached, a car stopped outside the shop, and she pointed at it to Ponta. The car door opened and a little girl and her dog got out. Saki's eyes lit up when she recognized them. That's Lily and Takeru. She thought to herself, do they also come to this cafe? While Ponta stood next to Saki and held her hand, the driver said goodbye to Lily and reminded Takeru to take care of her and promised to pick her up later. Takeru agrees, surprising Saki with his reaction. Inside the shop, Lily saw Saki and happily waved her hand, calling her to come sit with her, addressing Saki as Oni-chan. Saki agrees, and Ponta seemed interested and happy at this meeting, making Saki think that he really loved girls and children. But when Ponta looked down, he noticed someone standing there watching. When she looked up, Ponta saw Takeru looking intently at her. Ponta then barked at Takeru, who responded with a serious expression, sweat starting to form on his forehead. Takeru began to observe Ponta's body carefully. Then pulled out a chair for Lily to sit. Ponta thought to himself that at least he tried. Saki glanced at Ponta, scolded him for barking and asked him to be good. Meanwhile, Lily looked at Ponta with admiration and asked Saki if she could pet this wonderful husky. Saki smiled and agreed. Lily excitedly played with Ponta, cuddling him, making Saki look at this scene and think to herself that Takeru's actions were understandable, because Ponta is just a dog, there is no reason for her to be jealous. Chief. She reassured herself that everything would be okay. However, when Saki glanced at Takeru, she realized that he was watching the interaction between Lily and Ponta with a tense expression, and there was a hint of jealousy evident on his face. Saki still thinks Takeru is a dog, so she invites him to play with her, but he refuses. Before the conversation went any further, the waiter arrived with the food and apologized for taking so long. Saki looked at the dish and praised the exquisite presentation. Lily explained that this was Takeru's favorite dish and tried to give Ponta a piece, wanting him to try it. Takeru became extremely angry when he witnessed this scene. Just as Lily was about to feed Ponta, Takeru's anger began to reach its peak. Saki notices Takeru's anger and worries that he might lose control and harm Ponta. To calm the situation, she quickly ordered the same dish from the waiter. Meanwhile, Lily was still chatting happily, completely unaware of the tension, and tells Saki that her family moved to Japan because of her father's job. When preparing to leave, Lily thanked Saki and said goodbye. Ponta felt a bit scared, hugging Saki from behind as she said goodbye to them. Saki thought to herself that she was happy that they were able to become friends and suggested that they visit each other again soon. In the car, Lily leans on Takeru's lap, asking if they always have to be together, expressing her desire to play with Saki and Ponta again. Takeru gently placed his face on Lily's head, hugging her warmly. At this moment, Genzu was looking at a puppy, his curiosity making him unable to restrain himself. And asked the young couple standing in front of him. The young man smiled proudly and explained that it was a toy poodle, and a female puppy. Genzu replied that he knew what it was, but he wondered why it was in his house. The boy explained that his colleague was looking for someone to take care of the dog, so he thought he would take it home. Genzu thinks this action is selfish. The boy added that after his mother's death, the store's business had decreased drastically, and although they would help with care, he asked Genzu if he would be willing to take care of the puppy. Or not. Genzu looked at the puppy, his eyes met his big brown eyes sparkling with innocence. Genzu smiled slightly and gently placed his hand on the dog's head, telling him not to bother him too much, calling him idiot. Since then, the little dog gradually became a cute little girl. Always asked my grandfather to take me for a walk. Genzu smiled and responded with patience, saying that he already knew her request. As they walked together, Genzu couldn't help but think that raising it was like raising a child. Their walk comes across Ponta, walking with Saki in autumn clothes. When they met, Seki happily greeted them in a friendly manner. The little girl eagerly told Ponta to bend down and greet her. Ponta looked down, gently patted the girl's head. Saki couldn't help but admire the girl's cuteness and curiously asked her name. Genzu explains that the girl doesn't have a name yet, because they haven't decided on a name for her yet. As they continued walking, a soft leaf fell on her nose, causing Genzu to suddenly remember what his wife had said. That she could love because she had received love and now it was time for him to pass that love on to those who needed it. The girl innocently pulled Genzu's shirt, held the leaf in her hand and was happy. They continued walking, and soon, the girl quietly suggested to Genzu that it was time to eat. When they arrived home, the couple walked in, and the boy happily announced that he had bought the ingredients for dinner and asked if the dog was asleep. Genzu corrects that she is not a dog, confusing the boy. Genzu looked at the little girl sleeping in his arms with loving eyes and decided to name her Kaide. The boy agreed, then invited Genzu to dinner. Meanwhile, Ponta's personality is shown quite clearly. When he is happy, he is very alert and mischievous, but when he is sad, he becomes quiet and serious. This contrast is easy to understand, because everyone has ups and downs in life. At the same time, at an office in town, an employee nervously approached Ayan, apologized and announced that he discovered an error in the proposal. Ayan looked at him with a gentle but determined expression, politely replied that there was nothing more that could be done now and suggested that everyone work together to fix it next week. The employee was surprised by Ayani's calm and composed demeanor as she walked away, causing the surrounding colleagues to whisper to each other that the Iron Lady may have smiled today, but will surely smile tomorrow. There is a big storm. As Ayane left, one of the staff members offered to buy her a drink, but she refused. She thought about her subordinates' mistakes, realizing that sometimes haste can lead to mistakes, but she didn't let that bother her. At this moment, her mind turned to Hibari, and she looked forward to their outing tomorrow, imagining his friendly gestures. Ayane felt happy and excited. For having spent the past 3 months adjusting my schedule just for this occasion. She is determined to protect their little honeymoon, just them. Ayan wondered where they were going, and imagined renting a car to go on a long, relaxing trip, enjoying every moment. The next day, Ayane was at home, where Hibari was lying on the floor, his legs thrown up in the air. Suddenly, the TV news reported something unexpected. The storm, initially forecast across the Sea of Japan, had changed direction and was moving toward the Kanto area. Ayan's heart ached at the thought of Hibari's hatred for going out in the rain. She knelt on the floor, placed her hands on Ayan's head and screamed in frustration. Inside, Ayane felt abandoned by the god, wondering if he understood what she had gone through to make this day special. She silently wondered why the storm changed direction, destroying her plans. When she was about to give up, a sudden idea flashed in her mind, making her excited. She realized that it wasn't over yet, she could still spend quality time with Hibari. Ayane quickly grabbed the ball and called Hibari, telling him that they could still have fun together. She threw the ball, hoping he would run back and bring it back, but she was surprised to see that Hibari didn't move. Instead, he looked at her with lazy eyes and asked her to bring him the ball. Ayan chuckled, realizing that hunting dogs like Hibari were famous for their independent personalities and ability to make their own decisions. In a hilarious role reversal, Hibari throws the ball away and Ayane enthusiastically jumps in, imitating the dog's actions. At that moment, Ayane's phone rang, interrupting her happy moment with Hibari. She answered the phone, her voice gentle but patient, when she heard the manager's voice, who apologized for disturbing her on her day off. He explained that they needed a cost estimate early next week and asked Ayan to send it by the end of today, apologizing for the inconvenience. At this moment, Hibari's expression turned sad, as if he sensed Ayane's sudden tension. She felt angry inside, wondering if he knew this, why didn't he do it himself? However, she still agreed to send the estimate as soon as possible. As she hung up the phone, Ayan thought to herself that her manager was like an office warrior, always putting work first, no matter what. Her manager thanked her for her help. And Ayane started working on her laptop, tears falling silently. She had been looking forward to a special day with Hibari. But now, it all seems impossible to come true. Hibari asks her if they will be home today, and Ayane apologizes to him, still crying. Suddenly, Hibari stood up, sat behind her and hugged her from behind. Ayan was surprised and wondered if he felt lonely. Her heart pounded loudly at Hibari's sudden emotional action, and she told him that she understood. Hibari gently placed his hand on her head, and Ayane felt unfair. Hibari didn't like doing that, but because he felt her worry, he made an exception. Saki woke up in her room. It felt like it was morning, but she just wanted to sleep a little longer. However, Ponta suddenly appeared and curled up next to her, causing Saki to startle, her eyes wide open. She fell out of bed and onto the floor, feeling uncomfortable. Ponta, now in humanoid form, sat up puppy style, cheerfully greeting her with a good morning. Still sitting on the floor, Saki placed her hand on her chest and responded to the good morning. She thought to herself that since Ponta became human, these heart-pounding moments had started to happen. After taking a deep breath, she walked into the kitchen, where her mother was standing, and said that Ponta had woken her up. Saki's mother asked her again, "Is there anything strange about Ponta waking you up?" And Saki replied that it was really different from what she had imagined. Saki's mother reminded her not to expect Ponta to return to the way he was, because no matter what, he was still just a dog. Saki finds it strange that a dog suddenly became a human, but her mother tells her to accept that Ponta is still Ponta, unchanged. Saki couldn't help but notice Ponta's attractive appearance now, which surprised her. Her mother joked that when Ponta was a dog, Saki didn't even realize what he looked like. At that moment, Ponta rushed to hug Saki from behind, asking where she was going. He thought about how Saki loved him when he was a dog, and now, he compared the change in the way she treated him. Saki pushed him away, causing Ponta to fall to the ground. Seeing this, Ponta felt extremely sad, thinking that she no longer liked him. A moment later, Saki sighed when she saw Ponta curled up in the corner of the room, sobbing. She asked her mother about Ponta's actions, and her mother angrily replied that Saki was avoiding him, because she is the only person Ponta cares about. From Ponta's perspective, Saki is his master, and he believes that it is she who has changed. Ponta remembers the first time he went to Saki's house, when her father asked if she liked him, and she answered that he was cute. She recalls how she named him Ponta, inspired by the word pawn, in the script of her name. And she thought they were happy at that moment. She also remembered the time she hugged Ponta and promised that she would always be by his side from then on. Saki approached Ponta, sat down next to him and apologized, telling him that he was now like her younger brother and a very special part of the family. Hearing that, Ponta was happy, jumped on her and started to play. Saki lay under him, and in that moment, she thought to herself that everything would be okay, even though the pain in her heart remained. Meanwhile, Ponta is very happy and Saki apologizes to him, saying she can't play anymore. A moment later, Ponta tried to get his favorite ball, but it got stuck under the sofa. He raised his head and looked at Saki with pleading eyes, as if he wanted to ask her for help. Saki was surprised by Ponta's request, wondering why he asked her for help when she was the one who got the ball stuck in the first place. She teased him, telling him he should be ashamed for falling into such a situation. Despite the teasing, Saki still took the ball and gave it back to Ponta, reminding him to be more careful in the future. Ponta was extremely happy to have his favorite ball back and began to play with it excitedly. Meanwhile, Saki couldn't help but think to herself that she was still struggling to understand her feelings. Saki took Ponta for a walk, and he was busy sniffing around on the way. She asked Ponta how long he planned to do this, suggesting that it was time to go home. But Ponta, still sniffing, replied that someone had come here, trying to convey that he had discovered an interesting smell. Saki paid no attention to it, saying that they were done and that there was no reason to linger any longer. However, Saki's attention was attracted by a pair of shoes on the ground, and she looked up to see Michio from the next classroom standing there, holding the husky dog Shizuku in his arms. Shizuku was walking beside him, and Saki couldn't help but notice the pair. She wondered why she was so beautiful. Saki realizes that Michio has a strong, Yankee look, while Shizuku is a slim and energetic husky. At that moment, Shizuku noticed Ponta and started running towards them, making Michio struggle to control it. The scene is like trying to steer a ship through water, with Michio being dragged along behind as Shizuku yanks on the chain. Saki watched as Shizuku rushed towards them, while its owner struggled to keep up. When approaching Ponta, the two dogs greeted each other by putting their arms around each other and started playing, happily gathering together like old friends who had met after a long time. Saki couldn't help but think that Shizuku, despite being a husky, had the energy and size of a horse. Even when they were simply standing together, they radiated a distinctly destructive energy. Saki covered her face and wondered if the entertainment industry could keep up with their mischief. If they are silent. Michio turned to Saki and said, "Hey." Saki responded. Shizuku seems to be as healthy as ever, with a hint of joy mixed with helplessness, acknowledging the uncontrollable energy of the two dogs. Michio explains that Shizuku is a playful girl who has too much freedom for her to control. And now she's grown enough to do anything. Saki thinks that Shizuku communicates like a hometown girl, strong and stubborn. She asks Michio, is it okay for Shizuku to just wander around with him, and will she create a mess? Michio said nothing, just smiled and looked at the two dogs playing. Ponta and Shizuku continue to play, with Shizuku acting like a professional female wrestler. Saki watched as Shizuku used her foot to kick Ponta, causing him to fall into Michio. When Michio fell to the ground, Shizuku immediately ran to his side, hugged him and asked if he was okay. When he replied that it was okay, Shizuku gently kicked him in the back, telling him to stand up properly. Meanwhile, Ponta was still swaying back and forth, still too excited from the game just now. Saki observed the scene and thought to herself that Shizuku had a strong look, like a muscular girl, and Michio's shyness was the reason why everything became so confusing. As she prepares to leave, Shizuku says goodbye to Saki, making her worry if Michio can handle Shizuku's dominating personality. As they walked, Shizuku held Michio close and said, "You can't leave me alone. But don't worry, I'll protect you." Saki continued to look after them, still wondering about Michio's condition. Meanwhile, in the town of Virua, Noriaki returns home and receives a warm welcome. Takeru, who had been standing in the house for 2 hours, smiled and greeted Lily. At the same time, Hibari lay flat on the floor, tired after a long day of activities. Kaide, looking unhappy, called out to ask where the owner had gone, if he had brought anything to eat, and suggested going for a walk in another area of the city. Saki is giving Ponta a snack, while Shizuku is still playing energetically in her house. The scene is filled with the joyful sounds of the pets and their owners, each with their own unique personalities and habits. Kaide was biting her scarf, a habit she had developed since childhood, when she would bite everything. A boy looked at Kaide with concern, and wondered aloud what to do if the scarf was broken. Kaide looked at the boy with tears in her eyes. Suddenly, she burst into tears, her small body shaking with sobs. The boy, surprised by her emotional outburst, became frantic and didn't know what to do to comfort her. He turned to his father, Genzu, who had just walked out of the house with a worried look on his face, asking, "What's going on?" The boy held out the scarf and explained in a trembling voice. Genzu looked at Kaede, his voice softened, and asked, "Did she bite this scarf?" Kaede was still crying non-stop, nodded and choked up saying that the towel smelled very good. That's why she chewed it. The tears slowly subsided as she looked up at Genzu with big round eyes. Genzu looked at the scarf, his eyes misting as memories of his wife came flooding back. He apologized to Kaede, saying he understood. Then he turned to his son, asking him not to yell at Kaede, because she didn't understand what was going on. Genzu reminded his child to remember this and not to get angry over small things. He hugged Kaede in his arms, she wrapped her arms around him, her tears slowly stopped falling as she calmly hugged him. The son looked at that scene and commented that Genzu was now weak. Genzu's face suddenly sank, anger rose, he shouted at his son to be quiet and warned that if he continued to say that, he would be beaten. At Cozy Dog's Cafe, a unique offer is offered to customers. Each cup of tea comes with a story. Masuda, the owner and barista, welcomed everyone with a warm smile. He explains that his cafe was created to provide a peaceful space for dog lovers, where they can relax and connect with people with similar interests. Masuda expressed his deep gratitude, realizing that thanks to the support of customers, the shop has had the opportunity to welcome many furry friends and their owners. While Masuda continued to share, the customers in the shop were immersed in their own moments of relaxation. Saki sat next to Ponta, fondling the pet, while Genzu attentively fed Kaede, his eyes never seeming to leave her adorable appearance. Nearby, Lily happily fed Takeru, and at another table, Ayan felt peace spread as Hibari gently placed his hand on her shoulder. Masuda went on to describe his cafe as a place where people can find peace of mind, surrounded by the love of dogs and the warmth of the community. He was used to the gentle noise of the shop, but recently, something made him feel confused. Masuda's eyes turned to a girl and a boy standing near the counter, their conversation seemed tense. The girl, her eyes red, recounted that she had just caught her boyfriend cheating on her again. Masuda couldn't help but be surprised when his eyes were attracted by a strange scene. His dog Yamato suddenly turned into a bearded man, listening attentively to the girl's story. Masuda watched and couldn't help but think about Yamato, his most loyal friend, the dog who was the most famous sign his cafe had ever had. However, witnessing the girl chatting with Yamato, Masuda couldn't help but think that perhaps this dog was like the leader, the real mastermind in the story. The girl continued to confess her feelings, saying that she was always a serious person in relationships, but this time, she could not find a way to forgive her boyfriend. Masuda felt a bit embarrassed when he admitted to himself that he had always been a fan of the calm, understanding shopkeeper image in movies, the type of person that everyone comes to rely on. As the girl continued to confide in Yamato, she wondered if it was worth continuing the relationship anymore. Yamato listened carefully, then gently placed his hand on the girl's head. Her eyes filled with tears, and she buried her face in the table, whispering that Yamato was probably the only person who truly understood her, calling the dog master. Yamato tried to comfort her, but Masuda couldn't help but think to himself that how could Yamato understand the complexities of human relationships? After all, he is just a dog. At that moment, Masuda stood up and teased Yamato, saying that if customers were satisfied with the dog's natural kindness and cuteness, then perhaps he was no longer needed. But before Masuda could continue, a delivery boy arrived with a package and asked Yamato what was inside. Curiosity made Yamato unable to control himself. He hurriedly ran closer to the delivery boy, wanting to see inside the package. Masuda tried to remind Yamato to wait a bit, but in his excitement, Yamato did not pay attention to the size of the delivery vehicle and was hit. Masuda sat down in the middle of a pile of broken things, lamenting that it was an expensive and rare European tea set. Yamato laughed loudly, apologizing for the incident, and promised to make up for it. But when he tried to help, his actions caused more objects to fall, causing Masuda to ask him to stop. Masuda thought to himself, Yamato is truly a physical monster. And his worry was answered by Yamato's sad eyes. At that moment, Saki and Ponta approached to pay and thank Masuda for the meal, and praised the delicious coffee and new dog menu, which Ponta thoroughly enjoyed. Before leaving, Ponta hugged Saki from behind and they said goodbye. After they got out, Yamato extended his hand towards Masuda with a laugh. Masuda looked at Yamato's hand, thought it was too strong and asked what was wrong. Yamato replied, "The master is always so cool and he is proud that Masuda is his master." Masuda's face lit up with happiness. He suggested going for a walk, then hung up the closing sign and they went out together. On New Year's Eve, Uruha and Noriaki were relaxing at home. Noriaki happily fed Uruha the beans with pride. Said that the training sessions had finally paid off. Uruha's eyes lit up with excitement as he asked if he did well and Noriaki replied that he did well. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, Noriaki looked at Uruha nestled in his arms, worried and apologizing for not being able to organize a bustling New Year's celebration. He was afraid that Uruha would feel lonely when only the two of them celebrated Tet together. However, Uruha gently hugged Noriaki's face, gently saying that he did not feel lonely because he had Noriaki. Noriaki's heart was filled with happiness. He raised his glass and toasted to another year together. At the same time, at a New Year's party, Lily sat on the chair pouting, telling Takeru that the party was boring and only full of adults. She declared that she wanted to go out and play, but Takeru warned that it would be dangerous. Lily remained determined, and Takeru had to remind them that her father had told them not to do things they shouldn't do. However, Lily did not give up, grabbed Takeru's collar and looked straight into his eyes. Lily whispered that she knew Takeru wanted to go out too. And with him by her side, she feared nothing. The two secretly left the party, immersing themselves in the New Year's Eve atmosphere. As the old year gradually ended, Lily smiled at Takeru, saying that this year had been fun and that she was looking forward to next year's adventures. At the same time, Hibari and Ayane walked through the quiet streets on New Year's Eve, surrounded by sparkling Christmas lights. Hibari, in winter clothes, attracts all eyes with his outstanding appearance, causing people to constantly praise his beauty, likening him to a living statue. Ayane walked behind him, gently commenting on the remaining decorations and asking if he thought they were beautiful. Hibari responded calmly, but Ayane couldn't take her eyes off his beauty under the festival lights. She thanked Hibari for being by her side, and Hibari hugged her from behind, giving her some warmth to fight the cold. He suggested they go home because they felt a bit cold. The two left, missing the moment of welcoming the new year. Meanwhile, Saki sat alone on the dining chair, asking her mother about her father. Her mother replied that her father was on a business trip, just like last year, making Saki feel a little sad. She looked at the TV, watching the New Year's Eve celebrations, and imagined another scenario. Takeru, Ponta and Hibari form a successful idol group with the neighborhood dogs. She wondered if that was what kept her drawn to them. At that moment, Ponta ran in with the ball in his mouth, asking Saki to throw it to him. The sadness in her heart disappeared, replaced by a warm smile when she saw Ponta's happy face. She placed her hand on Ponta's head, saying that whether he was a dog or a human, his happiness was the most important thing to her. In a touching moment, Saki thanks Ponta for always being by her side and promises to be together forever.